Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. It is a full house, and we are excited to have you here for Enhance Your Imagery with Adjust, Detail, and Simplify, presented by John Barclay. John, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, John.
Excellent.
All right. If you're having any trouble hearing us, if the sound is at all bad for you, you can also call in to the number on your webinar module, and you should be able to hear us by the phone. A couple technical things first. If you have any questions, please use the questions module on your GoToWebinar panel. I will be answering them as quickly as possible. We do have a lot of people here today, so if they're not answered, if you want to send them to webinars@topazlabs.com, I will answer any questions that don't get answered during the webinar. All right, so let's get started. John is an award-winning freelance photographer. He's based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and is a passionate photographer. He is an enthusiastic workshop leader and an inspirational speaker. His program, Dream, Believe, Create, is presented to audiences around the country. John's work has been published in a number of magazines and books and is treasured by a number of private collectors, and we are so excited to have him here today. John, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you. I just want to say thank you first to the folks at Topaz and to Nicole. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the new webinar series that they're doing. They're doing a great job. I've been a fan of Topaz products for a long, long time. I just want to make sure, always in the beginning here, Nicole, you can see my screen now and my mouse here?
Yes, I can.
We're good to go. Excellent. Great. Let me just take a minute to just talk about processing philosophy first. It seems recently in a lot of my workshops, there's a lot of choices out there for software programs that'll help us enhance our images, and the question is always, what the heck do I use first? Because you feel a little intimidated. And I think one of the benefits that Topaz brings is especially for new photographers or people who are new to digital, it's a really nice, intuitive, quick way to work on your images. So my feeling is Topaz is a great place to start, and hopefully we'll show some of those ideas. And I'm going to cover primarily Topaz Adjust because that's really the workhorse in my mind. But I think it's important to understand what Topaz Detail does because it gives you some more control. And then I also like to use Topaz Simplify on occasion to help me smooth out some areas in images. So with that, let's get started. Let's go to this famous picture of a horse that I've used before because in my mind it shows very quickly just how powerful Topaz is. So we'll go up to Filters, Topaz, and go to Adjust. And what I'd like to do is just stop here for a minute and introduce those who don't know the Adjust interface to just a little bit of the layout. Over on the left-hand side, you do have presets, which are wonderful starting points, and you'll notice that the preview up here will show you a quick little preview, or you can click on them and you'll get that preview to happen on your image in the screen. But then, to me, the power of Topaz Adjust is really in the right-hand side of the screen over here. And so let me just take a minute and talk about some of these key sliders and what they do and how they will affect your image. And really the key one is, to start with this, is adaptive exposure in regions. The way I like to think about this is adaptive exposure is just that. It's adapting the exposure to the image, and then the region says how much of that adjustment to the exposure do we want to have applied to the regions of the image. And think about regions like this. Way to the left would be a few of the regions, meaning mostly the bright tonalities and the dark tonalities. As I start to move this region slider over, I'm now affecting more of the tonalities that exist in that image. And as I move it even further to the right, it's now affecting pretty much all of the tonalities in the image. So think about the power that exists with that. Not only, maybe let me back up and say it this way. with a lot of software, you have one click for an auto adjustment. And that's it. You're done. It's what they've chosen that algorithm to be to give you an adjustment. The big deal here is that you have almost unlimited control. As I slide this, you can see that I can make it garish looking if that's what I want to, or I can feather it and make it look just the way I want to. And then I can say how much of that adjustment do I want to apply to the image. So with two quick moves of the sliders, let me show you before, pretty flat and drab, and after, just by having a knowledge of how those two sliders interact with each other. The other ones I'll go through just quickly. The contrast is just that. It's just like a contrast slider in Photoshop or another program. Brightness will do just that. It will brighten or darken the image. Highlight and shadow is protecting the highlights from clipping, or the shadow is opening up some of those shadows and protecting those shadows. The detail slider does just that. It will add detail to your image, almost like sharpening, but a little different than that. Detail, and then the boost will affect some of the smaller details, which will start to make it look overcooked and grungy in a heartbeat. So you need to be very careful about that boost slider, I find. And we'll talk a little bit more about the detail slider and why we might use Topaz Detail instead. Color, for me, this is, again, the same type of relationship in the sliders. We have an adaptive saturation. It's going to adjust the saturation throughout the image. If we leave it over the regions here to the left, it's just going to do kind of the outlying regions. The more we move, the more we move this over to the right, of course it helps if I can grab it. So the more we pull it over this direction, the more of the tonalities in the image it's going to adjust. And then the noise module is just that. It's affecting the noise. So if you have noise in there, you can suppress it. And this box here says use Topaz D Noise. I can't suggest that strongly enough, I should say. Topaz D Noise is really one of the best products on the market for handling noise. And if you're going to be addressing noise in your issues, it's a good place to do it right from within this product. So that's an overview. We've got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So in this case, I prefer to go over to this side and adjust the image as I have here, and that's the interface. So let's just back up a little bit. I'm going to click out of that, and let's talk about workflow again. That was the introduction to the interface. I would always do a Command J and duplicate the background layer before I would do anything. A couple of reasons. We can then go up to Filter and convert to Smart Filter. Why do I want to do that? Well, because we want to have a smart filter allows us to go back and make adjustments. If we just use Topaz Adjust all on its own, it's not going to leave us with something that we can go back and tweak the sliders on if we wanted to. If we make it a smart filter, a smart object, then we can go back and work on that. The other reason we duplicate things and do these moves is so that we can put a layer mask, or it'll automatically oftentimes put a layer mask in there for you. That'll allow us to paint out an adjustment in an area where we might not want it. So now, instead of being global adjustments that we're doing, it'll allow us to have more localized adjustments should we want to by using a layer mask. So that's a big deal. So what we would do here again is we go back up to Filter. Just to walk through this, I like to reinforce things. And here we would come over to these sliders, and in this case I would do this, pull this adaptive exposures over, the regions a little bit, and then in here I'm going to leave the details off because the next thing I'm going to talk about is Topaz Detail in a second. So that's about what I would do, and that's how fast and how big of a wow for me Topaz Adjust is. Just to cover it over here, if you, by the way, you can go down to the bottom right-hand side of the screen and you can reset all and you're back to the starting place. And if you wanted to, you could come to something like Crisp and hit one button and have a look. Or you could go to Photo Pop. And just one little thought here. What's nice about the presets is it's a starting place. Think about it as a jumping off spot. And then what you can do is you can still now come over here and adjust it further should you want to, and fine-tune what that preset is. So don't think about a preset as a one-click and done. Think about it as a starting place that you can then tweak with the sliders that you've now learned a little bit about. Okay, let's accept that. And now you'll notice over here on the right-hand side of the bottom right, we have a layer, we have a smart filter, we have a mask that we can use. That's the advantage of doing these things. So now let's go back up to filter. We'll stay on this image, and we'll go to detail. Okay, if you remember, in Topaz Adjust, the detail slider is going to affect globally pretty much all of the detail in the image. The beauty of Topaz Detail, and I think the reason that the folks at Topaz came out with this, is we were all a little frustrated with not being able to control some of the, like for instance in an image like this, the clouds in the background. And the problem with that is the clouds will start to look grungy. Now you have the ability to just go to your large details, make an adjustment, probably subtle to see, but now with just adjusting, and what's happening is the detail in the horse, the fence, is being adjusted, but the sky is being left alone pretty much. Here's before, here's after. So in a nutshell, because the value of Topaz Detail is your ability to have much more control over the detail adjustments, the enhancement of the detail, if you will, in now instead of a global way in just the small, medium, or large details. So oftentimes I don't use the detail slider in Adjust. I will wait, finish my work there, and then go into Topaz Detail and do a much more fine-tuning job of, or finely tuned adjustment there. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll accept that. And we'll finish with that image, and we'll go on to another image here. And let's talk about Topaz Simplify. But before I do that, my workflow would be such, this is up in Maine actually, on a nice foggy day up there. But before I would use Simplify, because in my mind from a processing philosophy, I'd like the quiet, still feeling of this image. In my mind, I'm thinking Simplify right away when I saw it, because I want to smooth things out and keep it really almost painterly. But believe it or not, the first thing I'm going to do is go to Topaz Adjust. And I'm not going to go through, because of time, I'm not going to make duplicate layers and smart objects and all that right at the moment. I want to breeze through these things quickly and talk about concepts. And for this, let's go back and reset all so that we're back to a clean slate, because what you need to understand is every time you open up again into a Topaz Adjust, it will remember what you just did on the last image. There's sticky settings. And so you might want to go back and reset all each time you open the product up. And in this case, a little bit of exposure correction, and then I'm going to come over here and tweak that a little bit more and bring the adaptive exposure up just a touch. And let me just show you before and after. Hopefully you can see that. Sometimes you can't on these webinars. But it's just a subtle adjustment, adding a little bit more contrast is what I've done, and a little bit more pop. And that's all I'm going to do from within Topaz Adjust. I hope you're getting the idea that the power of the program and how simple and quick it is. But now I'm going to go ahead and go back up and go into Simplify. And this is one of the main reasons I use Simplify, is I want to do just that. I want to smooth out some of the details. So I'll reset all just because I don't want to clear out anything that's in the background. But just as a side note here, recognize that we have a very similar interface, which is wonderful. Topaz has done a great job of making their interfaces similar, or pretty much the same. And so we can hit a biz sum, or buzz sim rather. What did I say, biz sum? How about buzz sim? And that'll give us a very painterly look. That's one thing you can do. But in this case, I always find that's just a little more than I want. I could have hit that and come over to the right-hand side and started to adjust the sliders. But from experience, I know that I'm just going to come over here and just give it a little bit. Maybe just a touch more, up to about 0.2. And that's going to just start to simplify the scene just a touch. Let me see if we can go before. Here's the original. And here's the after. I think I need to slow down. If I remember, sometime there's a lag, so I'm going to do that a little slower for you. Before, after. And in the essence of time, I'm not going to go through all of the sliders in Simplify, but just know that on this, you can add back some of the detail into some of the areas if you want to. So you can bring this detail strength up, and it'll still give you that smoothed out look, the simplified look, if you will, but it'll start adding in just a little bit of the detail if you want to. So you have a lot of control here on the right-hand side to fine-tune the look that you're after. And then I think I would probably come in and add just a little bit of a little bit of saturation. Bring the color up on this a little bit. And there we go. I'm pretty happy with what I have here. Let's again show you the original and the final product coming out of Topaz Simplify. So that's how I use Simplify, oftentimes to smooth things out, and other times I will have a situation where the ground might be really crunchy, if you will, for a lack of a better term, in something that I've used Topaz Adjust in, and I want to simplify that out. I'll make sure to duplicate the layer so that I can put a layer mask in there, and then I'll use Simplify to smooth out maybe just the grassy area or the ground area and leave the rest of it just the way it was when I was working in Topaz Adjust. So we'll let that apply. And there you go. Let's move on to the next one. I'm going to go skip over here in the essence of time. I have more images than I need there, but it's always better to have more. Okay, on this, I would like to get an HDR look out of this. When I saw this old train, it's an abandoned train, I fell in love with the color, number one. When you see red, shoot it, they always say, and red's a great color to photograph. But I knew, again, from a processing philosophy perspective, that as soon as I shot it, it was going to look kind of flat when I got home. But I knew that I had Topaz Adjust in my back pocket, that I could come home and I could transform this into something very different. So let's do that. Let's go use Topaz Adjust. And in this case, I'll go ahead and use one of their presets. So I'll come over, I think it's called Spicify. Let's see what that does. Holy cow, isn't that great? One click, and just that fast, we can have something that looks like an HDR photograph from a single image, by the way. And so I think on this one, I came over and I brought the regions down a little bit, because here's a little thought. If we slide that region slider, remember that's the one that's telling how much of the tonalities of the images are going to be adjusted. You need to be a little careful, because as you push that way to the right, you're kind of flattening the tonalities of the image in my mind. And what makes great images really sing is contrast, is the varying shades of black and white, if you will, is what makes it really powerful. So sometimes if we push this way over here, the regions, starts to flatten things out just a little bit. Whereas if we don't adjust as many of the regions, we're left with a sense of depth, a little bit more sense of depth. Adaptive exposure, I actually pushed up just a little bit here. And believe it or not, I'm going to come down here. Oh, and here's a perfect example, by the way, of when using the detail slider from within the adjust module makes a ton of sense. Because we don't have a flat, empty blue sky that we're concerned about affecting if we do a global adjustment, it's perfectly acceptable to come to the detail slider here on the right-hand side and crank that up and really enhance the details with that tool inside of adjustment in this situation. And there you go. Look at the dramatic difference from the before, pretty flat and dull, to a little bit of work in Topaz Adjust, and we have a pretty grungy, which in my mind really feels right for this type of image. It's an old, abandoned, gnarly train, a great subject to gnarly up. Okay, let's keep moving along here because Nicole's going to want to kick me off here soon. Okay, let's talk about doing people. How do we address that? Because we certainly can do that. This is a good friend of mine who's happens to, at 30 years old, decided he had a midlife crisis and needs to learn how to box. That's not something I would want to go out and do, but thankfully he has great access to this, access to this great gym, and I've been able to enjoy going to photograph him. So what do we do with a situation like this? Well, we go back to Topaz Adjust again. And remember, we need to zero things out. He's going to look pretty terrible from that last adjustment. Sticky settings. And in this case, I have found a nice adjustment with the mild details. And let's take a look at the before and after. So now we've taken Dalen, who's just finished a workout, and he's all sweaty, and by one click we've sort of enhanced that look, made, you know, the whiskers on his face come out and the beads of sweat come out. Or let's try this other crisp setting. And with the crisp setting, it kind of brightens things up a little bit, but that's okay. We have control over that. We can bring the brightness down if we want to. We can bring the contrast down if we want to, just a little bit. I mean, just subtle little moves here, and you'll see that I'm creating a very different looking image. And so now we can go from a pretty straightforward image to something that has some drama, if that's the look that you're looking for. So Topaz Adjust is a great tool for people images and adding some drama to specific type of scenes. Not everything in a portrait is going to work well with this type of look, obviously. But again, Dalen being the boxer, it's kind of fun and over the top. Okay, let's cancel out of that. I don't think we need to keep saving those, so we'll do that. Let's come in and just, well, I want to make sure to get to this one. Here's an image. There's a wonderful place here. I live in the Bucks County, Pennsylvania area, and there's a wonderful castle there that I'm very privileged to have access to photograph, because you're not allowed to photograph there, but I'm allowed to bring groups there a couple times a year. And I just love these images lately. I've been really drawn to this idea of light and dark and creating this contrast that I've been speaking a little bit about. And I really like this image, and it's a single image that I've worked on, but I felt like it was missing a little bit of detail. And so what do I do? Again, here's the power of Topaz. I just went into Topaz Adjust. And again, we've got to get rid of that reset all here. Go back to the starting place. And with a couple sliders, and in this case, again, I'm over on the right-hand side, working on just the adaptive exposure a little bit. Too much. Just a small little, and then let's just bring up the regions just a skosh. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit more. But just with a very subtle tweak, we've added in a little bit of detail. I think just because it's the webinar, I'm going to put a little bit more in there so you can see it clearly. So here's before, after. We've added just a little bit more light into this scene so that you can see the beautiful color of all of this great tile that's inside this museum. And you can see a little bit of the detail going up the steps. So we've kept the characteristics that I was after, which was that dark and light, but we've added just a little bit more light, if you will, and detail into the image. Okay. Let's, I think I want to do this one, and then we're going to get pretty close coming down the wire. This is back, the boxer Dalen that I spoke about. He brought me to my first live amateur fight, which was, I have to say, I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. It was great fun. Horribly difficult to photograph because it's dark. And so guess what? I got a fair amount of noise in here. So let's take a little bit of time and talk about noise. Let's go into Adjust. And we'll show you again. Let's reset this. I'm going to come over to my sliders on the right-hand side and just do a little bit of work with these, my favorite two sliders. Bring the regions up a little bit, actually a little bit more, because in this case, I want that to be in around here. Okay, so I've added some brightness to this image, and now we can see a little bit more of the people in the image. But down in this bottom area here, we can start to see their face. Again, and just by way of review, I could have gone over here and hit the crisp preset and got that look. And you know what? Let's leave it on that crisp, actually, because look what's happened. Up here, because I'm shooting at ISO, a high ISO in this case, we've added a fair amount of noise with that particular adjustment. Some may like that look. It's certainly an acceptable thing to do if that's what you like. But let's go down here. Remember, on the right-hand side, we're in Topaz Adjust again. We can hit this Use Topaz D Noise, and we can start to bring the slider over, somewhere about that area. We should be able to see a difference. It takes a little bit of time. You do get a default setting. I'm working on small JPEGs on purpose here so that they'll go quickly. But if you're working on a large file, just be prepared to have to sit back and wait for a bit because it is a very intensive processing piece of software, but it's worth it. So look up here now. This area here, I don't know if you can see it on your screens. I hope you can. If you can't, you'll just need to trust me that it's pretty much removed all of that noise that was up in this area with that one little move. So once again, if you're using especially Topaz Adjust, that can start to amplify the noise when you're really doing some strong processing, remember that you have that ability to go into the noise module and get rid of some of that right from within Topaz Adjust. If you forgot to do that, let's slide this back down for a second. If you forgot to do that, hopefully you can see that now. You can see that noise came back. You can always go and let's say that you forgot and this is where you got to and you left that noise there. You can always go back into your choices here and go to Topaz D Noise and do your noise work from within here, where you do definitely have more control and you can start to see the noise and start to adjust it and have much more control over it from within here. So D Noise is a very, very powerful program and something that you should learn a little bit about because oftentimes we're going to run into noise and we need to address it. Okay, let's see. Looks like we've got maybe a couple more quick things here. Let's go back just to cover one more time because I do like to reinforce sliders and how things work. But once again, filter, adjust, and here again it's going to reset all and go back to the beginning. And so this time I thought I'd use this image to maybe reinforce the sliders and how they interact rather than picking a preset over here. So if I were to start from scratch on an image like this, I would do here. I would start on my favorite two sliders and start to get the interaction there. In this case, I would probably pump up the contrast just a little bit. It feels a little bright. I'll bring that brightness down just a touch. And then I'll add some detail into it with the detail slider. Again, this type of image is perfect because I don't have any blank areas that are going to get affected by that global adjustment of the strength slider. Might boost the smaller details up just a little bit. And then come down here to the adaptive saturation and start to look at that and get those red taillights on this old trolley car that kind of become nice and bright and in your face. And just that fast, that's kind of my hope here, is that you'll walk away from this webinar recognizing these tools are so powerful, but you can process pretty quickly. And in just, what did we do, 30 seconds or so there, we went from a pretty flat, lackluster image to something that looks kind of fun and more of an HDR-ish type of in-your-face look. Okay, cancel out of that. And we'll just do, I think, I'm looking at the time. I think we have 5 more minutes, so let's pick this because we can just cover this idea of Topaz Simplify again. Notice the some of, I'll call it algae or whatever it might be in the water on the water here. I really wanted to, I could spend time and go in and get rid of all this stuff and clone and healing brush within Photoshop, but let me just show you this. We go into Topaz Simplify. Remember, it's going back and doing what I've already done. Well, kind of fun here. What it did is it went back and remembered that preset I did on that main boat scene, the other boat scene that I did. And notice what it did to the water. It's still some of those little spots here in the water, but it really did, and again, we're in Topaz Simplify here, it really did a nice job of smoothing out the water, right? So let's go before, and let's go after, and giving us a lot more of a painterly look here. And in this case, I would probably come over here and bring the strength back up on some of the details so that the boat gets some of the details back in there. Hopefully it's not going to bring them back into the water, which it did a little bit, so we could just go back just a skosh on that. But hopefully you get the idea here. Topaz Simplify is what the reason I chose it here was to smooth out that water. Now remember, if I created a background layer first, it will allow me to have a layer mask, add that to that, and then I could paint all the detail back in these boats so that just the water would be affected by the Topaz Simplify move, and I could paint that all back in. Now, in a situation like this is going to seem a little odd, maybe, but it's something that I do quite frequently. So we just use Topaz Simplify to smooth things out. Why on earth would John go back in and use Topaz Adjust? Well, let me show you. And then we'll finish up here. Okay, so I just reset all in the bottom right-hand corner because if I come over to Topaz Adjust, I can still make tonality adjustments, right? And I prefer to use Topaz Adjust to do that. I find it a more intuitive interface to start to work on the tonalities here. And now we're adjusting the exposure, right, before and after. And believe it or not, contrary to everything I've just been talking about, I'll add just a little bit of detail back in, and that's going to help my boats. And so we've gone from here to here by first starting out with Topaz Simplify to simplify that water out, and then we came back into Topaz Adjust so that we could add a little bit of detail back into the boats area because we've already simplified the water. There's nothing to really add detail there, so that works. And we've done our adaptive exposure and regions adjustments from within the product that makes more sense to do it in. So a parting thought here. For those of you who are out there wondering what do I get, or maybe you have just Topaz Adjust, to me the best deal on earth is the Topaz bundle, where you get the whole group of products. Because as you play with the products, you're going to find that you will enjoy using some of the other ones, whether it be for specific applications and maybe not as much as the Topaz Adjust. But you'll definitely find use for Topaz Detail. If you like this idea of smoothing things out and making things look more painterly, then Topaz Simplify works really well. And to me, you need to have the D Noise program. It's a really great piece of software. And so now if you're already up to those 4 products, you might as well get the whole bundle. It just seems to make a lot of sense. So hopefully they'll invite me back, and next time we can maybe pick 2 or 3 images and be a little bit more specific in the workflow and possibly introduce the concept of layer masks and how I would mask in the boats in this situation and do a little bit more finer detail work in the future. But hopefully this has been helpful in this first go-round with my good friends at Topaz. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to do the webinar. They're fun to do. Hopefully it's been of value to you out there. Remember, it's going to be recorded. And I think Nicole has something that she would like to add here at the end. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much, John. That was great. First, we are going to ask just a few questions, if you don't mind, John.
No, I'm happy to.
All right. First, kind of a fun one. Quite a few people are asking where in Bucks County you're from, and somebody asked what is the name of the castle in Bucks County?
Yeah, I knew that would come up. I'm always afraid to show those pictures, but I live in a town called Chalfont in Bucks County, and the castle is called Font Hill, F-O-N-T-H-I-L-L. It is a museum. Henry Mercer's dream home, essentially. He was a big fan of the arts and crafts movement, so it is an arts and crafts home. Again, the key thing to say is it's open to the public. I highly recommend you take a tour. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to photograph it even with a point-and-shoot camera on a tour because it is a museum. However, because I've done some work for the folks there and developed a friendship, I actually do workshops there, and so that allows me to bring a group of 9 people in 2-3 times a year. As you can imagine, it fills up in about 2 minutes because people are anxious to go photograph there. But if you go to my blog and website, I've posted some things recently from an opportunity I had to go shoot myself there again. But Doylestown, Pennsylvania, Font Hill is the name of the museum. Please go and visit them, even if you can't photograph. If you want to photograph it, let me know, and I'll try to get you in a workshop.
Awesome, thank you. And your images from there are pretty amazing. It's gorgeous inside of there.
Well, thank you.
Okay, with these images, did you process, or Patricia wants to know if you processed any of them beforehand?
Yeah, every single one of the images I used today were basically sent there, raw images that I did nothing to. That's really bad English. I didn't do anything to. I just sent them into, I made them into a small JPEG so that everything that was done to them was done within a Topaz product.
Great. I have quite a few questions on smart filters. Would you mind through those steps one more time and explaining what a smart filter is?
Sure, that's fine, and we'll spend a minute on that. So we'll just leave this image on the screen. I'm going to go Command-J, or however what is it on a PC? Help somebody, do you know? I always get the Command or Control, is it?
Control.
Control, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a Mac user, folks. And so Command or Control-J duplicates the background layer. Look over here on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So now I have 2 layers. I want to now make the layer that I just created, which is layer 1. I'm going to go up to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Okay, and to make this easy to understand, I'm going to go ahead, and at this point what it's done, let me back up, it's put a little icon in my layer 1 here. And that icon tells me that it's now a smart object or smart layer. Now what I can do is go back up here, and in this case let's go to Adjust, and I'm going to make a really dramatic adjustment on purpose, just for yucks. Okay? And here we go. We've made it gaudy. I'm going to hit OK. All right, now notice over here on the bottom right-hand side, it tells me in my smart filter here that I have just added a smart filter, and I've added Topaz Adjust 4 as a smart filter. Now, if I double-click on that, look where I am. I'm right back to this image, and now I can say, boy, I've learned a lot about processing. I just took a workshop, and I learned that I'm over-processing my images. I can come back. I can tone this down. Let's take the boost out of there. I can make it look more like what I wanted it to look. I can hit OK. And now I didn't have to start over again. Imagine if you had 5 or 6 more layers that you had been working on in this image over here on the right-hand side. You would have to go start over again from the beginning without the smart filter in there. Does that help, Nicole? Do I need to add more to that?
No, that's great. That's great.
Okay.
Couple more questions here.
Sure.
Okay, one, Kathy wants to know if she can make adjustments using Topaz Adjust, then continue on to another program. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So you could then go back into Photoshop at this point, or if you have other software manufacturers' products that you want to use, you could then open their product up and add another layer and do that. Sure, the Topaz tools are just that. Think of them as another brush or in your palette of things that you can do. You can pick Topaz Adjust or Topaz Simplify or what have you to create or do a certain task and then move on to the normal part of your workflow.
Great. And lastly, could you possibly show us how to adjust just the sky in an image? David asked that.
Probably what I would do, if I'm thinking about what would be the best way to do that. So let's go back here. What I would do is if I'm let me see if I'm understanding the question right, Nicole. Between the two of us, maybe we can do it. So if he just wanted to adjust the sky only and not the horse in this case, do you
Correct.
think? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. You could do a selection and just do something on that selection, but just to maybe make it more approachable for the rest of us, let's duplicate the background. So Command or Control J to duplicate the background, and I'll go ahead and put a layer mask in there now. Down at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, way at the bottom here, there's a thing that I lovingly refer to as the washing machine. It's a square here with the round dot in it. I'm going to click that, and it puts a layer mask in here. Okay, so now what I can do is I can go up to Filter. Whoops. Hello, I've got to click on the image. Sorry about that. I was in the layer mask. It's not going to allow me to see the Topaz filters. Okay, so I'm going to go to Adjust, and so if all I wanted to do was adjust the sky only here, I could do that and get that look. So let's do it before. Okay, kind of lackluster. But a few slider moves here with adaptive exposure and regions. I'm not going to add any strength to it at all here because I want the sky not to be affected by details necessarily. So, but if you did, those are your choices. We could hit OK. And then I could hit the letter B. Now that I'm back in Photoshop anyways, I can hit the letter B, which will make me have a brush. And then just real quickly, the way we use layer masks is I got to click on that layer mask and make it active. The way that I know it's active is it's got brackets around the layer mask. So now that's active. And then over here on the right side of the screen at the bottom of my tool palette, I have a black and a white box. If they're not black and white, click the small black and white up there. It'll make them black and white. And then if I use the letter X, I can toggle between black and white. Now my mask over here is the color white. That means it's revealing the entire adjustment on this image. So everything I did within Topaz Adjust has been applied to the entire image. If I hit the letter X, you'll notice over here that it's toggled it to the color black in the foreground. Now if I paint with the color black, it's going to remove that adjustment anywhere where I paint. So now the horse is not being affected. I'm going to be really sloppy. Sorry, I'm just trying to do this in the essence of time. Obviously, I would use my tablet and all those good things. But notice over here on the right-hand side that I now have a layer mask. And so what's black in that mask is being concealed. So black conceals the adjustment that I made. White reveals the adjustment. So now I've adjusted just the sky, and let me do it before and after, but I've not adjusted anything else in the image. And that's it. Hopefully that was the question. As I'm sitting here thinking, Nicole, I wonder if the question also was about how do I adjust the details in the sky only. And so let me just address that real quickly. Sorry if I'm going too long, but
no, you're fine.
It would be the very, very same thing I just did here. You could go into Topaz Detail at this point and use Topaz Detail to adjust the sky to taste by selecting, again, if you remember, we have the large, medium, and small sliders there, so we could adjust just the sky, or again, it's going to affect the whole picture, but we don't care. We know that we have the ability to mask out or conceal that adjustment, and you would just do the same thing we just did here. Come back in, put a layer mask on that particular layer that you were doing the Topaz Detail work in, and then just reveal that adjustment in the sky only and conceal it with the painting with the color black to conceal it on the areas where you don't want that adjustment to apply.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We had a couple people ask, why don't you use Remask? And to those people, I just want to say there are many different ways that you can go about making your selection or your masks. And we do have another webinar, a Quick Tip Thursday webinar, where I'll be showing a similar subject, how to make your sky pop using Topaz Adjust and Detail. And I'll also show how to do it with Remask. So thank you so much, John. This was awesome.
Thank you.
You can follow John at his blog, which is http:// john.barclay.blog.barclayphoto.com, on Twitter, which his name is JH Barclay, or on Facebook, and that is John Barclay Photo. All right, thanks again, John.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.